Hi class, this video is going to be about taking a closer look at a model for a problem solution writing experience. And remember, this is just a model. This isn't exactly how yours needs to look. Your audience may be very different than the New York Times audience. Maybe yours is for a particular person, and so you need to write a letter, or you need to write a report, or some other form that I haven't mentioned yet. So this is just a model, kind of a good practices for what you might need to include in this problem solution writing experience. Okay, so this is College Isn't for Everyone by Oren Cass. And I know a lot of times you're taught, let's put the thesis first thing right up front. Well, he doesn't really do that until a lot later. We have a good idea of what this is going to be about, and the title basically tells it for us. College isn't for everyone, so we have a good idea of what this article is going to be about already. So titles are important. First, he starts off with a hook. Instead of starting with a thesis, Cass gives us two scenarios that introduce us to the problem, basically two stories of these two high school seniors, and it draws us in and it actually shows us what the problem is rather than tells us. Another thing, and I want to show you that yes, authors who are in the New York Times can have room for improvement. So I feel like this article has room for improvement right here in this highlighted text where he says, federal funding for higher education has grown by 133% in the past 30 years. Well, where did he get that number? Don't you think it would be more convincing if he cited where he got that information? Because how do I know he's not just making it up? I'm sure he's not just making it up, but it would be better if I knew where that number came from. And newspapers do have, they don't usually have citations afterwards, but he could have put in a little thing where he said, according to the budget or whatever for the government this year, this is where I got this number, but he doesn't say that. All right, moving on. He starts to actually talk about what the problem is and one of the causes for this problem. And that's another good thing to go about, is not just explain the problem, but to actually figure out why is this problem happening in the first place. And then he also gives lots of evidence for why he believes his explanation of encouraging everyone to go to college is misguided. And basically, sentence after sentence, just lots of evidence. And evidence will help you to convince your audience that what you say is important and true, and it strengthens your argument. He also uses a transition trick to help his audience stay with him by using words like, he doesn't use first, he uses one explanation, and then he goes a second explanation. Another fun word trick he does is he uses repetition purposefully to make his point clear. He says, if that were true, and explains why this isn't true. Down here, Cass actually does inform us of where he got his information. He says the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that makes me feel better about where this information came from. Then later on, he finally starts to lay out the solution to his problem. Now, one thing about his solution is that would be a room for improvement is that he has no outside evidence of others who agree with his solution or studies that would help prove its efficacy. And outside sources might help here, but maybe he doesn't have outside sources because this is an original idea, and there's nothing wrong with not having outside sources. It could be more helpful depending on the audience, but just having this idea out there for a newspaper, this might be okay to not have like study after study showing, well, this is why this would work. This is just an idea, and he's just putting out there into the world because everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people read the New York Times about this is something that we could do. And it's not till the very end that we really get to his main point that I've highlighted in green. A false promise of college success does more harm than good. So before we had the title where he's saying college isn't for everyone, but he kind of tells us why now at the end. Now I want to talk about a different essay. This is not a problem solution essay. It's more of a traditional research argument. But it does something that the other New York Times piece does not do, which includes counterargument, which I want to talk about now. So now I want to talk about these things I've highlighted in blue, which is counterargument, which is something that you might consider using. It's a good practice to use when you are writing about your problem and your solution. And counterargument, all that means is just telling us a little bit of what the other side might be thinking. Whatever argument you're putting out, there's always somebody who's going, yeah, but. And so this is just her kind of acknowledging that there is another side, but always kind of bringing it back to her argument. So for the first example, and she does this a lot in these topic sentences where she kind of focuses her paragraphs. So the first one is, while there may seem to be a shortage of kidneys, she says, like this is what a lot of people think, but she kind of brings it back to her argument. In reality, there's a surplus. Moving on to the next one, she says, there is certainly a risk in donating a kidney. So she has that acknowledgement that it is a risk, but she uses the word but. This risk is not great enough to be outlawed. That's a great way. Just using that word but is a great way to bring it back to your argument. But it's always nice to know that you have thought about the other side and what the other side's arguments might be. Again, she has another counterargument. Some agree with Pope John Paul II that the selling of organs is morally wrong and violates the dignity of the human person. So that was something that she had quoted in one of her sources. And then she uses that word, but again, this is a belief professed by healthy and affluent individuals. So she kind of shows, well, why this argument may not hold up in all places. So the idea of a counterargument is just something you might want to include or not, depending on your audience. Now again, these models are just models. That's not how you have to do things. But as far as like how to go about writing it, it's kind of up to you. But these are some good practices to follow.